Alright, so now we're going to learn how to factor a quadratic when you have a not equal to 1. And so we're going to look at when a is prime, so when our front number is a prime number, so 2, 3, 5, 7, numbers like those. So the first thing you do is you still multiply a times c. Okay, so in our t-chart again, we're still going to do that. So I would do 3 times 14. And get 42. And then my b term is going to be a 23, and that's going to go on the right side. So you multiply a times c, and you're going to do your t-chart. Okay? So I'm going to list all the factors of 42. So I've got 1 times 42. 42 divided by 2 is 21. So 2 times 21, 42 divided by 3 is 14. 42 divided by 4 does not work. And then we've got 6 times 7. So then those are all of our factors of 42. So since they're all positive, I know I can keep them all positive and see which ones will add to get me 23. And I can see right here that 21 plus 2 is going to be 23. Okay, so once you find your factors, this is going to be the trickiest part. So I'm going to actually write this over here. 2 is going to be chart, t-chart, to be exact. Okay, step 3 is called bust up the b's. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take your 2 factors over here, and you're going to bust up this middle term. So for example, we're going to bust it up into a 2 and a 21, okay? So the whole point of doing the t-chart is to find 2 terms that can split up this middle term, okay? And since this middle term had letters with it, we also have to add those letters with it there, okay? So you take those 2 terms and you put them in the middle. And then you're going to bring down the last term, and you're going to bring down the first term. Okay? So what do we notice? We notice that we have 4 terms, and if we have 4 terms, that means you can factor by grouping. Yes, that's coming back. Okay? So I'm actually going to rewrite this problem down here so we can see it more. So it's 3d squared plus 2d, and that's going to be a 21d plus 14. Okay. So now that you have 4 terms, you're going to factor by grouping, and you guys already know how to do this. Okay, so I'm going to look at the first 2 terms. I'm going to split them up, and I'm going to find the GCF. And so the GCF of 3 is 3 and 1, and the GCF of 2 is 2 and 1. And that means the only number they have in common is a 1. Out of D2 and 1D, I can take out 1D. And you will always be able to take out 1D. And then you're going to do your parentheses and divide to see what's on the inside. So 3 divided by 1 is a 3. And then 2 D's and take away 1D would give me a D. And then I've got 2 divided by 1, which is a positive 2. And then there's no D with that term because we took it away. Once you have that term in parentheses, you are going to rewrite it like last time. So I've got 3D plus 2, and then I need to figure out what's on the outside. And to do that, I'm going to divide 14 by a 2 and get a 7. And I can double check my work by doing 21 divided by 3, and that does give me 7. So then my last thing to do is to rewrite them in a parenthesis. I'm just going to keep that D plus 7 instead of 1D, and then 3D plus 2. Okay, so some things to notice about factoring quadratics is you will always have a linear term. So you will always have an exponent and a number, and an exponent and a number. So you're not, sorry, not an exponent, a letter. So you're not going to have d squared or cubed or anything. You're always going to have just one letter and then 2 numbers, okay? So that will always happen. And you're done. So let's look at another example. Let's look at 2 actually. So again, the first thing you're going to do is multiply a times c and do your t-chart. So 3 times negative 15 is a negative 45. And then you're going to bring that b term over here. So now, something I notice is that the only time I can multiply and get a negative is when my sign is a negative and a positive. So I am going to have to put a negative with one of the terms. But let me see what my factors are. So 45 divided by 5 is 9. So 9 times 5. And I can't think of any other factors except 1 times 45. So once I have those, I need to put a negative with one of them. So let's put it with a 5 and do 9 minus 5. And that does give me 4. So here are my 2 factors. So 9 and a negative 5. So next thing I'm going to do is bust up the b's. So again, you're going to bust up this middle term with a 9 and a negative 5. And since that middle term had x's, we're going to put x's with both of these. Okay? So now you can bring down your first term and bring down that last term, which was a negative 15. So I'm actually going to rewrite it down here. 3x squared plus 9x minus 5x minus 15. Okay? So again, the whole point of the t-chart is to find 2 middle terms to go here so that we can factor by grouping. So I'm going to factor by grouping by drawing a line, finding my GCF, which is 3 times a 1, and then 3 times 3. So my GCF is a 3. And then out of x squared and x, I can take 1x away. You will always take 1x away. Go ahead and write your parentheses and divide. So 3 divided by 3 is a 1. And then x2 take away 1x is an x. And then we've got 9 divided by 3 is a 3. And then if I had an x up here and I took it away, there's nothing. So I'm going to rewrite that parenthesis, 1x plus 3. You can also just write x plus 3. And then we're going to divide to find that last number. So negative 15 divided by 3 is going to be a negative 5. I can check that and do negative 5 divided by 1, and that is a negative 5. So again, my last step is to combine my 2 GCFs into a parenthesis. So 3x minus 5, and then I'm just going to write that x plus 3. Okay, so I got an x and a number, which makes me feel good. Okay, now let's try one more together. So you have 2x squared minus 13x minus 7. So again, first thing to do is multiply a times c and do your t-chart. So 2 times negative 7 is negative 14. And bring down that b term. List out all the factors of 14, which is 1 times 14 and 2 times 7. With this left side being negative, I know that I have to make one of these factors negative. So if I try this, negative 1 plus 14 is a positive 13, so that won't work. And I actually have to put a negative with the 14 to give me a negative 13. So 1 and negative 14 are my 2 factors. So that's what goes in the middle, 1 and negative 14. Again, my middle term had x's, so I have to add x's with those. And then you're going to bring down your first term and then your last term. Okay? So once you have 4 terms, we can start factoring by grouping. So again, I'm going to rewrite that down here so I can have some space. Draw a line down the middle. The GCF of a 2 and a 1 would be a 1, because that's the only thing they have in common. Again, x squared and x would just give me an x. Draw your parentheses. See what we can divide. 2 divided by 1 is a 2. And I would need an x with that term to get back to x squared. And then 1 divided by 1 is a 1. So 2x plus 1 is in my parentheses. divide to find that outside term. So negative 7 divided by 1 is negative 7. You can check that by doing negative 14 divided by 2 and still getting negative 7. So again, combine your GCFs in one parenthesis and rewrite your other parenthesis once. So again, notice I have two linear terms. I've got an x and a number and an x and a number. Okay, so that is how you factor when a is not equal to a 1. So if you have a number out here, when a is not 1, you got to do the t-chart and bust up the b's. So why don't you try the last two on your own, or last four, even though this next page does not say you try. You try these top two and these bottom two, and then we will go over them. So let's go over these four problems. So first thing I did was multiply 5 times negative 4 and got negative 20. I listed out all the factors of 20, and then I need to see which ones would add to get me a 19. I noticed that if this side is negative, that one of them has to be negative. And so I looked and saw that these were pretty close to being a 19. And if you make the 1 negative, that will give you a positive 19. So I replaced the negative 1 and the 20 in the middle. One thing I did not say before is the order of these does not matter. So you could have put 20z here and negative 1z here, and you will still get the same answer. Okay, so I rewrote them down here to give me some more space, and I factored by grouping, so I took the first two. And the only thing a 5 and a 1 have in common is a 1. And again, you can always take out one letter z. I divided to find my inside. I rewrote this parenthesis over here and divided negative 4 by negative 1 to get positive 4. Or you could have divided 20 by 5 to get a positive 4. And then the last step is to rewrite these, and I just wrote 1z as z, and then plus 4. And then I wrote 5z minus 1. So something to note is you could also have 5z minus 1 and z plus 4. So order of the parentheses, which one comes first or second, does not matter in this case. Okay. Again, on this second one, multiplied a times c and got 12. Listed the factors of 12, but I stopped when I saw here that 12 and 1 was close to a 13. And so 12x and 1x were my replacement. Again, order does not matter here. You could have had 1x here and 12x here. I rewrote it down here to give me some more space. I found the GCF of a 2 and a 12, which was a 2. Again, you can take out 1x. Divided to find my inside. Rewrote this parenthesis over here and did 6 divided by 6 to get a 1 on the outside. And then rewrote 2x plus 1 in one parenthesis and x plus 6 in the other. Okay, again, order does not matter. You could have these parentheses switched. The last two. This one was tricky, only because you get a really big number and that probably intimidated you. So when you get negative 108, all I do is do negative 108 in the calculator and I start dividing it by a bunch of numbers. So I divided it by 2 and got 54. So I said 2 times 54. And then I took 108 and I divided it by 3. And 108 divided by 3 is 36. And I just kept doing that until I got some numbers that would give me something close to a 23, because I knew that I had to put a negative on one of them. So when I got down here, these numbers are close enough to a 23, and if you put a negative with the 4, that does give you a positive 23. So then these are your two terms to bust up the b's. So again, I wrote them down here and put x's with them. Your middle terms will always have x's or a letter with them. And then I found the GCF. So GCF of 3 and a 4 was a 1. Then I had x, and then I divided and got 3x minus 4 on the inside. I rewrote it and divided these last two numbers to get a 9, and then combined my two GCFs like so. Okay, again, order does not matter at all. Okay, last one, 5 times 2 is a 10. 10 times 1 gives me 11, so 10 and 1 were my two factors that will go in the middle and bust up the b's. I wrote them all together on the same line down here and factored by grouping. I got 5x as my GCF of the first two and divided to find the inside. I rewrote the parenthesis and I divided, and then I wrote them in a parenthesis. And again, order does not matter, but that is how you factor quadratics when a is not equal to 1. Thank you for watching. You're amazing. Bye.